Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the CCRB's 2021 Youth Summit on Policing. We're so excited to have you all here with us. We have an amazing lineup of speakers, panels, and an open forum that we hope you all participate in. To kick things off, we have the chair of the Civilian Complaint Review Board, Reverend Fred Davey.
Thank you, Hira, and good evening to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us at this 2021 Speak Up, Speak Out Youth Advisory Council Summit. Now, while we cannot be together in person this year, I am very excited to welcome participants from all over the country, representing cities like Seattle and Denver, and of course, New York. This event wouldn't be possible without passionate young people willing to dedicate their time to better the relationship between the NYPD and youth in our city. So thank you. As many of you know, I'm Fred Davey, and I'm proud to serve as chair of the New York City Civilian Complaint Review Board, known as CCRB. The CCRB is an all-civilian agency that is completely independent of the NYPD. Our job is to investigate when New Yorkers report police misconduct, regardless of their borough, their background, or their age. Last year, much of the world turned its focus to the police misconduct that has been plaguing communities for decades. Stemming from Black Lives Matter protests, the CCRB received 750 complaints of misconduct, which we are still investigating. Over the last 5 years, nearly a quarter, nearly 25% of all CCRB complaints involved a young person. Early experiences with police officers can be especially traumatic ones, can shape a young person's attitude about law enforcement for the rest of their life. We are here today to work with you, the young people, on the problems you see with policing. But just as importantly, on the solutions you come up with to fix those very problems. That is why we are taking today to listen. We want to hear you. We encourage you to share what you've experienced, whether good or bad, and to share your ideas on how to make things better. We will soon hear from our wonderful Youth Advisory Council, without whom none of this would be possible. Thank you also so much for the fantastic group of 20 young men and women who have dedicated so much time and energy to serving your community. I encourage anyone here today who wants to be involved to look into joining the Youth Advisory Council. I also want to welcome and thank our panelists for being with us today, along with a special guest. That is Herman Merritt. Mr. Merritt is our newest CCRB board member, and we are so lucky to add him to our ranks. And so Herman has served New York City and his community for decades, and I am really looking forward to working with him. Mr. Merritt, Herman, would you like to say a few words to us?
Thank you, Reverend Davey. Good evening, everyone. My name is Herman Merritt, and I'm the newest member of the CCRB. And this is the first official duty that I've had since joining the board. And it's very fitting that I'm here because I spent my entire career working with young people. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, and the Brooklyn members of the City Council selected me to serve on this board. I spent 36 years working for the Department of Education, doing many things, starting as a teacher and retiring as a principal. And I know better than most people that it's the young people who are going to make the change in this country. So I thank you for taking the time out of your schedules to participate in this summit. I know that we will listen to you, you will benefit from participating, and we have a lot to learn from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Merritt. We're so lucky to have you with us here today. I'm now extra excited as well to give the floor to one of our very own Youth Advisory Council members, Kyrie.
Hi everyone, my name is Kyrie. I'm 18 years old and I grew up in the Bronx. I joined the YAC because many people in my neighborhood have suffered from police brutality, but they don't think that they have the power or voice to stop it. So I joined the YAC to make sure voices from my community are heard and to fight to make a change in policing in my community. Today is an amazing opportunity for any young person to share their voice and their experience and be a part of the change. We have 2 panels where we will hear from young people across the country and their experience with police reform in different cities. We will also have poll questions and an open forum where I hope you will join me in sharing your experience.
Thank you so much, Kyrie. I'm now going to ask everyone to participate in a quick poll. On the right-hand side, you'll see some poll questions pop up shortly. This is completely anonymous. We just want to get a little bit of a feel on how folks are interacting with police in their respective cities. So the first question is, do you feel safe approaching a police officer? You can answer very safe, somewhat unsafe, or not safe at all. The second question is, how likely are you to report something to the police? Very likely, somewhat unlikely, not likely at all. And the third question is, how comfortable are you with police being in your schools? Is it very comfortable, somewhat uncomfortable, or not comfortable at all? And we'll give you a few seconds to respond. If you don't see the tab, it'll be on your right-hand side, or there might be 3 little dots up on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can see, you can use the drop-down menu and the tab will be pulling. Give folks a few minutes. It looks like we're good with the poll. And let's see what some of these results are. Let's give it a second to tabulate. Thank you so much for participating. So for the first question, do you feel safe approaching a police officer? It looks like the majority of people said somewhat safe. That's pretty good. We have the second runner-up to that is somewhat unsafe. So it looks like majority of the people are in that kind of medium space. For the second question, how likely are you to report something to a police officer? It looks like most people responded with somewhat likely. So that's 16 folks. And then the second runner-up to that is very close. C and D are very close together. So somewhat unlikely and not likely at all. And the third one is, how comfortable are you with police being in your schools? It looks like the majority of responses are not comfortable at all. That's very interesting. And the second runner-up to that is somewhat comfortable. That is very interesting, and it'll be something that we'll dive into in just a moment. Thank you so much for participating. So next up, I'm going to pass it on to Sarah, who is another Youth Advisory Council member for us, and she'll be introducing our first panel. And as we have Sarah come up, we'll have our panelists join us. We'll give folks a second just to be upgraded here. And we'll have, great. Looks like most everyone is here. We have Jonathan, Thomas, and Deshawn. Great. And Sarah, take it away.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah and I'm 16 years old. I joined the YAC because I think it's important for youth to participate in the conversation about making the policing system that they're going to inherit more just and equitable. To that end, I'm excited to introduce the amazing group of panelists we have here who will discuss what they think are the biggest issues facing police reform and police-youth relations today. So, Jonathan, can you start?
Hey everyone, my name is Jonathan Sermpagoa. I'm My pronouns are he, him. I currently go to Bard High School, Early College, Queens, and I'm an organizer at the Teen Activist Project of the New York Civil Liberties Union.
Thank you so much. Thomas?
Yep, I'm Thomas Rose. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm 11th grader at the Paraplegia Institute in Brooklyn.
Thank you. And Deshaun?
Hi everyone, my name is Deshaun Smith. I am a youth leader with Voices of Youth in Chicago. I'm a board member with Communities United and I'm a part of Voices Whole School Safety Plan. Voice has relocated over $3.2 million from SROs to put into the Whole School Safety Plan, which funds school program plans like counselors, peace programs, and more.
Thank you so much. Now, moving on to our questions. As our first question for Jonathan, as a response to the killing of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others, we saw thousands of people, including youth, protest all over America and the world. What was it like in your city during these protests, and what impact do you think that they've had on police-community relations in your city?
Yeah, that's a very great opening question. I remember being on the front lines of protest coverage, either being a chant leader for grassroots organizations that were doing protests, marshalling on the sidelines with the safety teams, or even being a sound system personnel. And oftentimes with our interactions with the New York Police Department, they would forcibly shove us to the sidewalks because they wanted to kind of give a justification that we're obscuring traffic and kind of taunt us with like commands and remarks, and even like use their vehicles as like blockades. Even though we had protest permits and we were able to march throughout the streets, they would still kind of resist us from moving forward with our marches. And with New York City being like a very progressive like city, and like the nature of it being for it being like a big place of activism, protests kind of sprung out as soon as the video of George Floyd being murdered on Facebook was uploaded. So around May 28th was kind of like the beginning stages of where a lot of local organizers were, in relation to Black Lives Matter, they were bringing it up into like City Hall and also parts of Manhattan, and then onto like different boroughs like Mount Haven, the Bronx, or even in Jamaica and Queens. So it was very much a quick response to that. But as you know, there was like a lot of coverage regarding police brutality that happened throughout the months of June all the way to August, where a lot of police officers, they would use like pepper sprays and mace protesters and organizers. They would even use like riot gear and use their platoons and hit people, even like people that were not even at the protest, but rather they were journalists or even medic staff that were there to kind of cover. A lot of it was pretty gruesome and pretty like just it was an abuse of power per se, and you see a lot of it just coming in and out with like videos of people like being like put on the sides, and just a lot of it was forceful tactics that did not seem like our right to protest was being in full effect. So that was kind of our interaction with the police, and unfortunately, I was there to witness some of that. But I think it just kind of speaks to the volume of how a lot of youth not only face police in schools, but even in the activities that they're involved in, which is maybe organizing or an activist groups around the city.
That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing. Same question to Deshaun. How does that compare to your experiences with the protests in your city?
I would say during that time, I saw more unity throughout Chicago. Voice put on a youth-led action that launched the beginning of our whole school safety plan, which is a project that relocates money that is used to fund school SROs and put it into programs that fund that particular school's safety plans, such as counseling, peace programs, and so on.
Thank you. And then Thomas, how did you respond to that as well?
Yeah, I think it was really powerful to see people of all races just come together every day and every night, expressing like their outrage of seeing, unarmed Black people being killed by police, and calling for there to be, systemic police reform and change. And in my neighborhood in particular, Williamsburg, We had large marches like every night after George Floyd was murdered, and throughout the summer this continued, and people would come out on the balconies and on their windows, and they would cheer on the protesters and support the movement. And at the time, I felt that many things would change, and finally change, since people were finally, recognizing how people of color were, so often victims of police misconduct, and that people of color were, treated very differently than their white counterparts. But even after, the peaceful protests, police officers were still acting very aggressively and violently towards the protesters, which I think was really disturbing. And I think it really proved the point the protesters were trying to make, that in a lot of cases, police use excessive force overall in situations that the excessive force just isn't really warranted and needed. So yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And then our next question for Jonathan as well. The CCRB's 2020 youth report highlighted several instances in New York where youth under the age of 18 were handcuffed, arrested, or faced gunpoint for engaging in typical youth activities, such as playing with sticks, jaywalking, sitting on a stoop, or taking out the trash. Have you seen or felt any similar trends in your city?
Yeah, for sure. So particularly I grew up in a middle school and school district that was heavily policed. So a lot of SROs were definitely kind of around our area and kind of monitored our activities as kids throughout the neighborhood. I live in Elmhurst, Queens, and throughout that time it was a lot of just simple activities. We would still feel like we were being monitored by the New York Police Department around places like the park, for example. We're just playing basketball, or we're eating food on the curb, or we're walking to Queens Mall, and yet officers, they would be roaming around with their walkie-talkies and kind of peacefully following us as though we're up to no good per se. And every time we were doing these activities, either it's usually in a group, or even if I was by myself doing sports in the park, they would always feel like they would want to start a conversation, but in a more demeaning approach. It would be hey, what's going on? Or hey guys, what's going on around here? They would kind of confront us, and not in a very welcoming manner. It was mostly just kind of very demeaning and patronizing, to the point where you start feeling unsafe, just because you don't know what's going to happen next. If they're going to start asking you questions, why they're kind of trying to invade your space, even though you're just trying to have a simple hangout with your buddies. A lot of things like that kind of felt as though the police wasn't there to necessarily protect us, but rather trying to interrogate us and feel like we were doing something wrong, even though we were just being kids at the time. And I talked to other people in different areas. For example, in the South Bronx, I was talking to my friend there, and he told me that they were playing a game of stickball, and the officers around the precinct in that area had come down to shut down the whole entire event. Unfortunately, a lot of that was canceled, and a lot of these communal events were kind of shut down on a matter of noise complaints. Even though no one reported it, they would just say, oh, someone from the apartment complained, but you wouldn't have a valid permit or a warrant about who made the excuse. So it was just a lot of just rhetoric that didn't seem credible, or even just when they were trying to kind of be involved with community relations, it's not even improving it, rather it's just shutting it down and dismissing people.
That's interesting. Thank you. Thomas, could you speak to that as well?
Yeah, sure. Well, personally, I haven't experienced, negative interactions with the police myself. I know that it really happens a lot in New York City based on the stories in the news that we hear, or stuff that gets posted on social media. And I think, unfortunately, there's some police officers that make certain assumptions about, youth of color, that when they're gathered together, that they just wouldn't make, that they're going to make their white counterparts. And, whether it's a matter of implicit bias or just outright racism, I think it just points to the need for police to, really get to know the people and the communities that they serve. Because if you know the people you're policing, you're able to, interact with them in a positive way, not in a negative manner. And I think that things like this and getting to know the people in your community can lead to stopping, unwarranted negative interactions and arrests.
Definitely. That's really important. Moving to the next question about policing in schools for Jashawn. Policing inside schools is not consistent across the country. Some schools obviously are more heavily policed, while others have little to no police presence on campus. Can you tell us about police presence in your school, your relationship with the officers, and also how metal detectors in school make you feel, if that makes the environment safer, and just what the role of school safety officers should be?
I would say at my school, there was no relationship between students and the SROs. Students would only see the SROs when they were coming in to arrest or discipline, or when they were going to get water or going to the bathrooms. School should feel like a safe place, not a place where you are charged as a criminal for something like a fight. We want to have more steps in place instead of always resulting in SROs. This is why we need to continue to open conversations around whole school safety.
Thank you so much. And then moving to our final question for Jonathan. There are a lot of adults watching today, including educators who don't often get to hear directly from young people. So what do you want your principal or teachers to know about your safety and your interaction with officers at school? And then what do you wish adults in general knew about police interactions with young people in school or outside?
I guess kind of like vocalize the concerns, and even like just as a student per se, that's been going to a public school system with New York police officers for quite a while. I think that like in the recent years, especially with a lot of students being more vocal about it through joining organizations that communicate these like concerns, I still feel like the city council and the Department of Education have been very unreceptive to the countless claims and stories that students have been entailing, with regards to like their experiences with the NYPD and also SROs at their schools. Because like living in Queens, for example, I've been close friends with people that are coming from families who are undocumented, or even those classmates of mine who are undocumented. And, they're coming to a place of supposed learning where they should feel safe, but it doesn't help that the police can have very straight ties to the Immigration and Customs and Enforcement, or ICE. And being that kind of close connection and being in close proximity with such a very demeaning group, a group that's ICE that's been known to target communities of color that are immigrants, it doesn't feel like it's a right kind of a gesture for kids of such vulnerable backgrounds to be entering those spaces and being in the same rooms with people that can literally just check the information by their principal, and if they found out they're undocumented, they could report their family, and they have the address there because of the school. And also another thing is that there's been a lot of cases where like vulnerable populations, for example, disabled students that have learning accommodations, students who are mentally and psychologically distressed because of trauma maybe at home, those people have been met with a lot of brutal police tactics and like being tackled to the ground just because they aren't seen as behavior or having misconduct throughout the schools. And I just think that the way the NYPD has kind of handled that situations shouldn't be ideal and shouldn't be a place where kids are supposed to learn and feel safe, but rather get met with these kind of actions that are hurting them. Just kind of close off like students need counselors and cops. Students shouldn't have officers, but rather social workers who can help handle situations and not feel like they're entering spaces that are commanding them or feel like they're being under control to that extent. So yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our panelists from this panel. Yohaira?
Awesome. This was so insightful and incredible, and I feel very honored to have all of you on here, especially being young leaders in a time that we lived through collectively, but to know that you all were out there advocating for your community is really an inspiration for all of us. I'm going to ask folks if you have any questions for the panelists. On the right-hand side, there is a Q&A function where you can, on the drop-down menu, you can ask, the option is ask all panelists. So feel free to ask a panelist any questions that you might have. And I can read it out for Sarah to relay. I'll give you all a minute to look at that. And while we're waiting, I do have a question. Oh, here we have a question from Lisa. And Sarah, I'll kick it over to you after I ask it to designate who you would like to respond. And I think maybe we might have enough time for each panelist to respond. So the question is, how would you make improvements to the way SROs are used or not used in your schools? Thank you, Lisa. Great question. Sarah?
Sorry about that. I was muted. Okay, so Jonathan, do you want to kick off by responding to that?
Yeah, just to repeat the questions asking about how can schools use SROs in a better way?
How would you make improvements? How would you make improvements to the way SROs are used or not used in your schools?
Yeah, I think in relation to school resource officers, it all really depends also on kind of the culture of the school and how, I think usually, for example, I tend to see that a lot of more like overly populated schools, especially my middle school, that was like 1,700 kids from 6th to 8th grade. Like I felt like a lot of administrative responses was trying to think that if more officers were into school, that it equates to more safety, if that made sense in their mind. But I do feel like that I like if schools were to kind of implement it, you know, I think school resource officers are maybe necessary in facets where communities that are much more prone to crime or maybe much more prone to gangs around the area. That it does make sense, but at the same time, a lot of it was kind of oversaturated throughout the building. Like we would literally be monitored in our hallways, going to classes. We would be going to lunchrooms and seeing the officers just kind of survey around the area while we're trying to eat lunch and go go to our tables. So rather than I guess in flooding and oversaturating school resource officers in our buildings, it's more as in just trying to give us space between them and make sure that like their presence is there just for the safety of us, but at the same time making sure that they don't impose as a kind of a intimidating threat to in our minds, especially at like such a vulnerable ages of like 11 to 15 when you're seeing the NYPD like every day, and it feels like more like a juvenile detention center than it did for like a school at a time. So I think one recommendation is for schools to kind of push down on that, kind of let students have their space, but also keep maintaining safety at its finest.
Thank you. That was a great response. Deshaun, do you have any ideas on that as well?
Yes, I would say SROs, I feel like they shouldn't be in schools because, we want an environment for kids to be safe and, to be able to, excel in school, and like having police, is making them, be scared to go to school or, scared to walk down the hallway. You want them to be comfortable so they can achieve at school.
Definitely. Thank you. And Thomas, how about you?
Yeah, I can answer this partly. So in my school, I go to private school, so we don't have SROs in our school. But I think if we did, I think the improvements would depend on the culture of the school. So in my school, we only have 90 people in our grade, and we're all really close. And there honestly really isn't a need for them. Teachers in my school are really open, so if there's any type of incident that happens, they can get involved, and they all know us really well. So I think any improvements that need to be made would just really depend on the culture and environment of the school. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yohara, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, we have another one. All of you talked about counselors in your various answers. Can you speak more about how many counselors you have in your schools and what they do?
Okay, we could start with Thomas for this one.
Sure. In my school, we have an upper school counselor as well as our deans and our homeroom advisors. And our counselors if we need to come to them with any issues, whether that's a school-related issue, a personal issue, an issue with something that, an academic issue, we can always go to them and they're open to give us advice and lead us like on a good path. So yeah, yeah.
Great, thank you. Deshaun?
I would say in schools here, there's only one counselor to like 400 students, and they're more focused on the seniors than all students as a whole. So it's not really working in favor for the students. They're more focused on the students to get out of the building than the students that are coming in the building.
That's interesting. Thank you. Jonathan?
In my current high school, we only have 4 counselors and compared to a student body of 650 kids. So, it was kind of difficult, I think, also to kind of reach out to them because we kind of have to sign up online through appointments. And they have their offices obviously in the building, but a lot of it's also sign-ups and like on a paper sheet. So our kind of relationship and communication with our counselors is not really present per se. And it takes a long time even for them to kind of reach out to us without knowing if we had that issue or we had signed up before. So there definitely is a disconnect in my current school.
Thank you. Yara, is there anything else?
Yeah. Cool. We have more of here it is. If you were able to decide where to place more resources in your school, where would you put them? Let me say that again because it's not deliberate. If you were able to decide where to place more resources in your school, where would you put them?
Okay, Jonathan, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, by resources is like funding per se, right? If I'm kind of just want to make sure.
Yeah, it sounds like resources, programs, funding, curriculum, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's, definitely because of like kind of the DOE's like transition back to in person. I do feel like a lot of the funding could be allotted to facility and maintenance. Because a lot of schools currently don't have ventilators, for example, or don't have proper conditioning due to protocol for COVID. And even a lot of like the sports teams and art programs for certain high schools are kind of cut and are trying to be revived back. But, because funding is very limited to certain schools per district, I do feel like a lot of that money could be allocated to, programs and things that drive the student culture and student body to kind of go back and feel like they are back and fully in person into like the regular high school experiences. And yeah, also just keeping the building on check because we are also still in kind of an ongoing pandemic with the variants going on. Facility and maintenance should be a priority too.
Definitely. Thank you. Thomas?
I would say personally, we could put more resources into faculty and staff, specifically like counselors. I mean, although our like upper school size is only like 400 people, I think having like one more guidance counselor would be beneficial because these staff members can only focus on only a couple students at a time. So their availability at times might be a little bit hectic, or they might not be available to help someone at all times. So adding another guidance counselor or dean or advisor might be helpful for some students.
Yeah, that's definitely relevant. Deshaun?
I would say I would use it to help bring more counselors into the school for holistic safety for students, so they won't have SROs in the school. Is to better help the students instead of to make them scared to come to school.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions, Yara?
Yes, we have a couple more. Do you feel your peers are as passionate and invested in police and criminal justice reform as they were last summer?
Thomas, you want to start with that one?
Sure, actually. I do actually think all of my peers in my grade are just as interested in it as they were last summer. We're all passionate activists for this type of cause, everyone in my grade really. And lots of our community engagement events have centered around this for the past year. And I, as a member of the council that puts together these type of engagement events at my school, I know that stuff like this is going to continue throughout the year. So these discussions and events will continue, and I know people will show up and support them.
That's good to hear. Deshaun, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I would say working with Voice, we have more people joining Voice and, just coming to realize that, they have to speak up to change stuff in their school in order to, have change for not only them, but for the future generation.
Thank you. Jonathan?
I think for, peers in my school particularly, it's not that they're not passionate, it's just a lot of times they're not aware or even know thinking through what the issues going on with kind of like our situation with the police, or even like in the greater scale, like social justice issues. Like a lot of people, they kind of like were kind of, their first introduction to somewhat was last year with a lot of the protests happening, but once that kind of died down, it was just more in people kind of was like up to them in their own research, in their own time to kind of locate and research more about these issues. So if I were to say, honestly, not so much. However, I feel like outside organizations that are active in the activism space and are also involved in advocacy, peers that I met through their organizers, activists, they also are very passionate about that. So I think not necessarily like school culture-wise, but I do feel like certain organizations that find like specific people who are passionate, they come together and it becomes like a greater force of change.
That's great. Thank you.
Awesome. And we have another question. With the steady increase of school shootings, have there been any situations that occurred in your respective schools when you were happy that SROs were present? So I guess like any kind of situation where it made you feel safer for SROs to be there.
Deshaun, do you want to start with that one?
I would say, for me personally, I would say, no, I don't really have a lot of experiences like that because the school I went to, they didn't really have, incidents where I hope that SROs were there because, kids, they come to school to learn. They don't come to, to start a problem or start a ruckus or to cause violence. They come there to do their work so they can go on to the next level.
Thank you. Thomas?
Yeah, even if SROs were present in my school, I don't think there would be any situations where I would feel better that they were there. Just because we don't have incidents where they would be needed. We don't really have fights or anything like that. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Jonathan?
Not necessarily in my high school, but in my middle school, it was a pretty current. One incident stood out back then was when a sixth grader had brought like a BB gun for some reason to the middle school. So the next day after the incident, and they found out, my school implemented metal detectors. So that was kind of, I guess, a gesture of safety that I think was kind of appreciated by parents. But at the same time, though, it was a bit. It did kind of create some tension though, because a lot of times a lot of kids would kind of get profiled, or they would bring like a scissors, and then that would ring up, and people would get scared because like the thing rings. So it was kind of a fiasco with that. But in a general sense, I think like that plan did help out for people and for parents to be reassured that that incident wouldn't happen again. But yeah, not currently though. Do I have any incidents in my current school?
Thank you.
The next question is, how do you feel about defunding the police?
Okay, Thomas, do you want to start with that one?
Well, could I ask what they mean by defending the police, just so I know how to answer that one?
I'm sorry, how do you feel about defunding?
Oh, defunding. Oh yeah, okay. I think that if we determine what parts of the police department to defund or reallocate the funds, that it could be useful. I think that in a city as large as New York, it's important to make sure that we aren't hindering the police department's ability to keep the city safe. But I think that if we work with the police and create a strategy to reallocate funds to things like social services, school counseling, and things like that, it could be a useful strategy to improve the relationship between youth and police in New York. But ultimately, we need to make sure that everyone's on the same page, that it's a well thought out process, and that we're keeping the city safe still.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. Jonathan?
To kind of just branch off of Thomas's points, I think there's a lot of kind of misconceptions with like the term defund the police, and a lot of people, they automatically think it equates to abolish, but a lot of people that are advocating for it, they kind of just want to talk about the whole funding of the police and allocating some of that money into resources and into programs and nonprofits, for example, organizations that are grassroots or community-based that would more as and handle the jobs that usually NYPD people are assigned and do it much better. For example, like usually we say counselors are much more needed than, per se, SROs in schools to handle situations where kids are maybe distressed or have personal issues going at home. They wouldn't need to go to a police officer and talk about what's going on at home, but rather a counselor or a social worker who's more fitted and has been trained and certified to fit that kind of situation and dilemma. Also, additionally, a lot of the problems that we see around policing has been in neighborhoods that are obviously not funded or they don't have enough resources. So if we're able to, extract those funds and invest in, for example, nonprofits, community-based organizations, and also infrastructure like supermarkets and things that are vital for communities to thrive on, rather than having to rely on the police for some of that resources, would be much more better suited for New York City to be on a more equal playing field. So, yeah, that's kind of my whole thoughts on that.
That's really interesting. Thank you. Deshaun?
I would say on defunding police, I would say I would agree with defunding police because like in Chicago, they're not really needed in schools. We need more resources as like counselors and social workers because as of people living in Chicago, we go through traumas of losing people that we're close to gun violence and stuff like that. So I would say that counselors would be more helpful for kids that's going through, depression from losing a friend or something like that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Deshaun. We have a question from please discuss how you perceive police and whether or not they do, in fact, make neighborhoods safer, especially those that are predominantly Black and brown.
I'm sorry, Yohara, you cut out, but if everyone else heard, Thomas, can we start with you?
I can repeat it. Thomas, did you hear it?
Oh, I heard it.
Okay.
Okay, for me, I live in a fairly predominantly white neighborhood, so I think my interactions with the police have been fairly positive. Other than protests where they've gotten more violent unnecessarily, just my day-to-day interactions with the police officers in my neighborhood have been fairly good. I haven't had an instance where I feel like they have violated my rights or anything like that. So yeah.
That's good. Thank you. Deshaun?
Uh, I would say in Chicago, I would say no because in Chicago we see a lot of police brutality and stuff like that, and in our neighborhoods they're not really helping the problem; they're more making it worse because instead of helping the problem, they want to go and harass people and hit them and stuff like that.
Thank you for sharing. Jonathan?
I would say that, like, I guess my neighborhood's perception of the police, it's been fairly modest or not necessarily too negative or too positive. It's just rather a lot of times, like we haven't had the police presence around our neighborhood, like be so active, especially after like call outs against them during last year. A lot of it actually isn't necessarily on the neighborhoods, but it was like a lot of school police officers would be located around school districts throughout Queens, and those interactions with the police has been fairly negative per se, just because I kind of didn't talk about this before, but a lot of like profiling, a lot of slight aggressions towards kids, and not handling situations with, for example, kids who are having certain circumstances that are going home. A lot of times they would kind of perceive that the police is matter there for security and surveilling them rather than protection. So yeah, that's kind of like the overall perception of police, mostly on like the youth level.
That's interesting. Thank you.
Question is it likely for police to agree to diverting, do you think that it's likely for police to agree to diverting their funding into social and other services?
Okay, we can start with Jonathan.
Hi, sorry, can you repeat the question, Honor?
Yeah. So it's, do you think that it's likely for police to agree to diverting their funding into social services or other services?
Do I think the police would agree upon that?
Yeah.
It's hard because I feel like in New York City, police unions are very much active and they're very much vocal about usually on it's kind of like half and half, where some are like this kind of few instances where a lot of police officers either resign because of the protests last year and they kind of are on the stance of supporting defund the police, but at the same time there's a lot of networks and even the NYPD, they have recruiting programs for high schoolers and even the youth to kind of get involved with the New York Police Department. So the whole kind of entity of the NYPD and the police unions and kind of like the reputation is kind of highly regarded in the sense of more traditional folks that believe in allocating safety towards their actions. So honestly, I wouldn't think they would support it fully. If not, they would critique it or be against it. Yeah.
Thank you. Deshaun?
I would say here in Chicago, no. I feel like police wouldn't agree with doing it because they feel like they're doing the justice to stay in school, but in reality they're making kids, scared to come to school and, to be safe in school. They don't feel safe being around police inside of school.
Thank you so much. Thomas?
Yeah, this is an excellent question. I think, I've personally worked with commissioners, captains, and the like in NYPD. And I think this is the reason why you need to really clarify what you mean by defunding the police. Because I think if you go up to any officer nowadays in the street and just ask them, do you support defunding the police? Their answer 9 out of 10 times would probably be no. Reason being, they might not know what you mean by defunding the police. But I think if you clarify it to say, like, do you support reallocating some funds from the police department to go into social services, to go into, crisis counselors, guidance counselors in schools, that might change their answer because they know what you mean by it. So I think ultimately we need all be on the same page about that term so that we can all, understand what it means and make, educated comments on what it means.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Do you believe if there are black and brown officers and black or brown officers instead of white officers in predominantly black and or minority neighborhoods, a better relationship would be built between the community and law enforcement?
Deshaun?
I was saying Chicago. It might be because you know the black police officers here, they respect the neighborhood, and they know how to interact with their own kind. So they probably would be able to go in predominantly black neighborhoods and help change stuff and help people look better at cops because they understand how their own kind is and how they react to stuff.
That's interesting. Thank you. Thomas?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I think that just having police officers who know the neighborhood better would make result in a better relationship between the community and law enforcement. I don't think you need to have a specific race patrol a neighborhood where one race is lives there more than another. I think if you just have officers that know the community and know what it's like to live there and know the people there, that will result in overall a better relationship between the community and law enforcement, since the community knows that these officers that are patrolling my neighborhood know me and know what I'm living through and know what I'm going through.
Absolutely. Thank you. Jonathan?
Yeah, I definitely agree on the point that, the NYPD, if they're going to implement officers, they should hire folks who are familiar with the neighborhoods that they patrol. And also, even better if they grew up and were raised in the neighborhood, so they kind of know the nuances on how, of how to kind of approach people that are around the area. Because one of the biggest criticisms that I do have against the NYPD is that a lot of times their workforce is pertaining to people coming from Long Island, from upstate New York, and then they send these people who are very unfamiliar, who maybe have never even seen lots of BIPOC people, or people of color, into these neighborhoods. Like, of course, their interactions and their upbringings are not going to adjust to this new change of scenery, where they're seeing people of color, they're seeing, kind of scenes of maybe poverty or even crime that isn't familiar or even relate to their backgrounds that they grew up in much more privileged spaces. So it is important to kind of see not just representation via skin color, but representation in people that kind of know how it is to be at the neighborhood, how they can relate back to the people that are in the same place that they grew up in, and how they can approach people throughout their neighborhoods to better community relations.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
What made the three of you so passionate enough about policing and reform to become youth leaders in this space? I think Sarah's Wi-Fi might be a little off, but Deshaun wanted to kick it off. What made you passionate enough about policing and reform to become a youth leader?
I would say what made me become a person in doing this work is because last year I lost one of my closest friends to gun violence, and he was in Voice and Communities United. And, that really, made me think about staying in this program and, living on his legacy.
It's incredible. Thank you so much, Deshaun. Jonathan?
Yeah, on a similar notion, it just comes from personal experience and seeing interactions with the police when I'm in middle school, and going through that neighborhood and just seeing their presence and how they were involved in our spaces and growing up as well. It definitely prompted me to kind of feel like I had a responsibility to kind of vocalize those experiences that me and my peers had gone through at such an early age with the police in our schools. And I think necessary to people that feel like if they want to adapt or even create change, that it all starts from how they can tie it back to their experiences. I feel like a lot of people, when they think about like activism or advocacy, it seems like such a far side word. Or we think of like Greta Thunberg and how she grew, like, you know, like she did a simple action and like protesting, and it became a whole movement. If people can kind of not necessarily think about the scale of what they can do, but rather the impact that can cause into joining groups like this, that can, you know, really inspire a lot of people to do the same in our steps.
Thanks. And Thomas?
Yeah, I think overall what made me so passionate about this cause was the fact that I want to better the relationship with youth and police in the city, because I think we can't expect our city to be safe if young people don't trust the police and police don't understand young people. So I think it's so important to have a mutual connection and understanding and overall work to build, to bridge the gap and divide between young people and the police.
Thank you so much. Again, I really echo the fact that all of you are here today, really representing the incredible leadership that you've shown, Jonathan, as you were mentioning, through lived experience. And it's really just an honor, again, to have you all here and to have a national conversation on how we can get there. One last question before we wrap up. This is coming from an adult. What can we do as adults to make young people feel safer? Thomas?
Yeah, I think ultimately, checking in on us and making sure that, we feel safe in the city, it can help us a lot. Being young and a teen, and it's really stressful for a lot of people. We have, at least in my grade upcoming, we have standardized tests and all this other stuff coming up. So I think, just checking in, making sure we're all right, can really make a difference in our safety.
Deshaun?
I would say in Chicago, with adults, checking in on, youth on like how they're feeling, on like how they're doing, and like where their mind is and stuff like that.
Finally, Jonathan.
I mean, just this entire summit is kind of the first steps in doing so, right? Asking us questions, engaging with us in our conversations about this, and listening to our conversations and anecdotes, I think is one of the key experiences in which adults can be not just as supporters per se, but allies and people that can advocate on behalf. Because obviously as teens, we can only do so much in our capacity. We're consumed in school, but if we're able to voice our concerns and also our comments to people that have standing presence in their own organizations and their own impact to the city, if they can carry those conversations, if they can carry those anecdotes and bring to the forefront of people that they know, whether that be a city council person that they know personally, or a person, an NYPD officer that they talk to, bringing these conversations that we just communicated, the three of us, into your workspaces, into the places that you live through, can just kind of do us a favor, and making sure that we're not just saying things and they're coming out the other ear from people older our age, but rather we're actually finally being heard and seen.
That's amazing. As an adult, I do have to say that I'm personally taking those recommendations on and doing what we can to support that. But also the power of youth just is so much bigger than a lot of what we can say. When it comes from young leaders like you all, it can really go a long way in helping us reimagine what policing and youth can really be. Thank you all so much for joining us. Again, such a pleasure, such an honor. Y'all are brilliant. We're so excited that you took some time out. For our next part of the panel, thank you all for joining us. We're going to ask folks for another poll question before we move on to our second panel. with, and right on the right-hand side, you'll see the polling come up. Do you think that the BLM protests changed the way people think about police reform? No, yes, kinda. Second question, do you think society can reimagine public safety? Yes, no, I'm skeptical, sounds sus. And then the third question, do you think that you personally have an impact on policing? Yes, let's do this, yes, but I don't know how, no, or I would like to, but I need help. Take some time on the right-hand side to list your responses. Okay. And let's see what people responded with. Okay, let's see. For the first question, do you think Black Lives Matter protests changed the way people think about police reform? The majority of people overwhelmingly said, yes, that's amazing. That's really inspirational. The second one, do you think society can reimagine public safety? Again, yes. Yeah, overwhelming majority of you all think so. And that's a really optimistic and great place to be. And the third one is, do you think that you personally can have an impact on policing? And it looks like the majority of people said, yeah, let's do it. Again, people are really, yeah, we have a lot of young leaders on here. And then the runner-up by a long shot would be that I would like to, but I need help. That's great. We're going to share some resources a little bit later in the chat, and also provide information for those of you that live in New York, how to join the YAC to try to be some more agents for change. So while we get folks ready for the second panel, Soren, if you can go ahead and upgrade Mia, and also Mickey. Great, I see most of them on. Is Hannah on as well? Great. Perfect. Great. And I'm going to kick it off to Haria.
Hi, everyone. My name is Haria, and hopefully you can tell that I'm not a young person. I actually work at the CCRB, and I'm senior counsel to the executive director, but one of the members of the team who helped put together the Youth Advisory Council. So I'm very happy and lucky to moderate this second panel. We believed that it was necessary to put together a Youth Advisory Council and hold events like this because of the types of conversations we just had in the first panel, and I'm excited to have that now in the second panel. So I think we can kick it off right away, and I will start with Mickey. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Okay. Hi, I'm Mickey. I'm 15. I'm from Hollis, Queens, but I've moved to Elmont, just like on the border of Queens and Long Island. I go to school on the Lower East Side. I go to the United Nations International School, and I'm 15.
Great. And Mia?
Hello, my name is Mia Dabney. I'm a senior at Cleveland High School. I'm 17 years old. I use she, her pronouns, and I am from Seattle, Washington.
So happy to have you. Javier?
Hello, my name is Javier Bravo, and I work with Bridging the Gap Kids and Cops in Denver, Colorado.
So let's kick it off with you, Javier. Many large cities in America right now are facing contentious police-community relationships. Often, officers don't live or spend time in the cities they police, and civilians are fearful or don't trust the officers. What is something you have seen the police in your neighborhood do that is good and you think should continue? And what is something that you think they could improve upon or something that they should stop doing?
I believe that police officers should people that grow police officers that grew up in that neighborhood should be the ones that patrol that area, because I feel like they would be more comfortable in patrolling those areas and knowing what type of people live there around there. And because if you put a cop that gets trained to be cautious and how I maintain the peace, they may not know hey, some certain things happen here, and they might see it, things that they were trained to do, they might see it as an offense and instead of just something that regularly happens in the neighborhood.
Great. Mia, how about you in Seattle?
I think they could authentically connect with the community during community events. So when we have our community movie nights, or when we're getting our books and our backpacks for the beginning of the school year, come and connect with us. And instead of sitting in your car and observing, connect, get to know us, get to know our names, get to know our families, and just make sure you're creating that unity in the community so we can grow and become and thrive.
Absolutely. I think that's a very important distinction about getting out of their cars, joining the community. That's great. Nikki, how about you?
Something I've noticed in my community that I think is good from the police is when they have community meetups, especially after instances of violence. I know that's something that the community outreach program or team has been trying to do a lot more across the city. As far as something I think they should stop doing is not abiding by driving rules. It seems very benign, but it's something that the NYPD tend to do, blocking off roads for really benign things. Just having very little interaction with students in general, I think they should improve on that. And in respect to having relations with youth, I think it should be outside of circumstances of violence, because that seems to be the only time when they want to reach out to communities is after instances of violence.
Great. And following up on that, Nikki, how do you think police officers should be trained on how to interact with youth? And what would make you feel safer as a young person in interacting with police officers?
Throughout the city throughout New York City, they do have lots of youth programs like STARS. I think there's a virtual reality thing that they have as well. But as I said before, lots of the interactions youth have with police are under circumstances of violence, and they only reach out to communities after someone has been killed or after there's just been general violence there. So I think it'd be interesting if there were relationships with them outside of those circumstances, just getting to know police officers outside of their job, seeing them as humans, because that's going to make it easier to do their job and also be able to trust them.
Great. Mia, I would love to hear your thoughts on that same question.
Yeah, I don't think it's about the training. It's about the hiring process. I think that's where it starts. We need to hire people who have humanity and see the humanity in others. And currently, that's not what we're seeing with our police officers that we have. So it's to make sure that we're hiring those people and we're part of the hiring team of those people who care about the community, who want to see it grow, like I've already stated before.
Great. Javier?
Yeah, as Mia is saying, I agree with her. It really doesn't have to do with because the training kind of, I don't really know much about it. Is that possibly just having to how to maintain peace, kind of their whole motive, maybe stop a fight or something like that. And yeah, it kind of really has, as she's saying, has to do with knowing someone's a human and treating them as a human, and treating them as just a person of chaos, because that's kind of how they kind of treat people, they're just trying to cause chaos, and that's already what's going on. So just a small error that's happening, something small, and then they're making it even larger instead of trying to minimize the problem.
Great. So talking about hiring, we know that New York City Police Department and police departments all over the country have made an effort to increase diversity and representation to reflect demographics in the communities that they're policing. Do you believe that officers of color can change the system from the inside, or do you think other changes need to be taking place? Javier, let's start with you.
I don't really think it really has to do a lot of like race has to do a lot with like changing how the police system works, how it will work from the inside to the outside. I don't think it really has to do with that. I think it really just has to do with like how they're apart from like their training. It also has to do with like where they're coming from, because it can be someone that's probably I would say from like a Mexican, can be a Hispanic race, and he can probably come from a very wealthy area and like have to work in and working as a police officer, and then having to like deal with a Hispanic who comes from like more lower area, like where I'm from, and like they'd be like they have a different reaction to like how this teenager is reacting to how like he probably have interactions in his community, and it would be, I don't think it really has to do with like the race. It kind of mostly has to come down to like how they are. Sorry. And it comes down to whatever they're like, however their personality is, if they want to use someone as a human or not.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think goes along with what Mia was saying. Mia, do you want to flesh out your idea a little bit more and expand on that?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's, to an extent, I think BIPOC police officers can help. And maybe that's just in that specific department, but I don't think as a whole we can make that change, and that change will even happen. Because if we really go back to history and think about and learn from our history, we know that police officers were not invented, and the career was not invented to actually protect people. It was made to catch enslaved people, enslaved Black people, and also free Black people. So specifically talking about the slave patrol, that's what the police officers originally were. So I don't think we can have any changes until the mission statement has changed, because even though we've changed the name, the uniforms, and even the times have changed, the mission statement, which is to kill and to hurt and not protect, has not changed yet.
How about you, Mickey?
Yeah, I also agree to a certain extent this could be helpful. It is very difficult to relate to someone, especially within circumstances in which you're trying to protect their safety, or unless you think they understand what form of safety you need, unless you think like they understand what it means to be violated both physically and emotionally in the same way that you have been, or lots of people within your community. And this is all regards to the relationship that people would have with police officers and communities have with the police. With that being said, I don't think that having police officers reflect the demographics that their policing should be used as a crutch to address the blatant biases which many officers hold. To that end, I think it'd be really interesting to introduce critical race theory, or CRT, to NYPD training or police unions or departments across the country in some capacity, because you cannot police someone if you don't see both their past and their present. And when it comes to biases, if someone is treated like a criminal, there is no reason why they shouldn't act like one.
Great, and that's huge. Mickey, I want to talk to you a little bit more about that idea. And I also want to hear from the rest of you, recognizing that this is a tough question that probably nobody has been able to answer yet. But how do you think that we can look for these types of qualities when hiring for police officers? A lot of you spoke about, the need to understand humanity, the need to have a police officer that understands the humanity of a person. How do you think that we can look for that when hiring officers? If you can answer that, but I would also love for you to talk a little bit more about why you believe critical race theory is something that needs to be introduced in training.
I think within the hiring practice of police, if I'm not mistaken, majority of the officers within New York City, or not majority, but a good handful of them do not come from the city. They come from like upstate and like deep in Long Island. Not only that, but the exams that they have to take, they're exams that if someone were to study for, they'd pass. And that's not really the point of policing. The point of policing is to find people that are passionate about it and have the respect for people that may not come from the same background as them to like police them and protect them. As far as introducing the CRT, there has been lots of backlash where that's concerned because people think of it as bashing on people that have biases. We all have biases. That's not something that CRT is trying to take away. Just being able to recognize and acknowledging what your biases are, and that's not very hard to do, especially if you're a police officer, because that is your job. You're meant to protect without bias, or bias to some extent.
Great. Mia, can I pose you the same difficult question?
Can you say the question for me one more time, please?
Sure. You, all three of you actually talked about hiring police officers that understand the humanity of people that they're going to be policing so that they can treat these communities the way that they should be treated. How do you think that we can look for those qualities when hiring for a police officer?
Thank you. I think it goes way farther back, like I was talking about the slave patrol, it goes way farther back into education. So I'm in the Washington NAACP Youth Council, and one thing that we are currently fighting for too is implementing ethnic studies K through 12. And I think it goes back to education. And one thing that I think I discussed with a lot of the youth I talk to is that education is power. It can get you so far, but with police officers, they have that power, but they don't have the education to back it up. So they're not knowing what they're doing with their job because they are racially profiling people or just shooting to kill and not shooting to think what are the next steps. So making sure that we're actually mandating ethnic studies so white police officers, black police officers, and other races of police officers are trained on, like, this person may not have the same skin tone as me, but they are just like me. We may have different experiences, but I'm going to respect you and I'm going to see you as a human being.
Great. Javier, do you have anything to add?
I believe it's Mia. What Mia was saying about how we should take a study on ethnics because it's very useful because a lot of things that some races do are very common and very normal things to do in public, and maybe something that they might a police officer might see as a threat, and it's probably just something normal in that community, and getting to learn what their past is and how what that neighborhood is kind of getting to look into how certain places work, how certain places run. What kind of criminal activities go on there, or what things community things go on there as well. And for the hiring process, as they were talking about, possibly having people from the same community, being able to be there and be part of that process of hiring people, because then they could say hey, yeah, I very much like this officer or this person, not this officer, this person, of how he acts. As a person, you want to like this officer as a person, not a police officer, but you also want someone to protect you at the same time.
So switching gears a little bit, while the Black Lives Matter movement started long before 2020, a lot of the country and the world didn't pay attention until the protests last summer. Did the protests change how you feel about police in any way? And what do you believe the legacy of the 2020 protests is right now? Let's start with you, Mia.
I think it showed what police officers were truly capable of. It just pretty much revealed what we knew they already were doing to a lot more communities of people who were uneducated about what was happening with the police brutality that many BIPOC are facing. Just by the pepper spraying on just marches or the rubber bullets shot at people. It was crazy. And it just showed people's true colors too, even police officers. It shows people's political opinions and other opinions about people's life. And it was crazy. But I think 2020 will of course, it has gone down in history through the pandemic and through the increase of like popularity of the Black Lives Matter movement, but it will go down in history of showing a shift in the way we as like world have operated. And I think hopefully it will be going in a positive direction, but it just matters on what we as community members do to take those actions to make that change.
Javier?
Yeah, I think it very much changed the protest very much changed my view of police officers, and more so after like whenever they went to go raid, when like white people went to go raid the White House, and I kind of was like seeing how like they reacted differently to like how when certain people started to like protest first, and then they whenever people were protesting and yet they were throwing gas like tear gas at the people and to try and like spread them out, and like not like that was kind of like not the right move, and it was like very I would say like very overkill, like not the right way to control the people. And as for like people that went to go riot to the White House and breaking in and like I believe hurting people while trying to break into the White House Capitol, and I was just like, you can see like the difference in between like how they treat certain people and how they treat others. And I very much see like, hey, police officers do have a certain view of the races than like they just seeing them all as just human.
And Mickey?
I agree with everything that's been said. My feelings toward police did not change at all. It cemented beliefs that I had prior, especially when comparing the interactions between Black Lives Matter protesters and the rioters after Capitol insurrection. And as far as like a legacy that these protests have left, like not only in the U.S. but also looking internationally at how it's brought light to like tones of colonialism, like in the UK and like other European countries, how it's highlighted racism within U.S. police officers.
So what do you guys think is the future of policing in the U.S.? Mia?
I think it, like I have already stated before, it needs to change. There will be, we'll continue to just go down this rabbit hole of people BIPOC being killed by police officers and then no one being charged, and continuing to make that snowball effect bigger if we don't, again, change the mission statement and be a part of the hiring process and be a part of those changes where community voice is needed.
Javier?
Yeah, I think when the protest started and like more people, and then people started to like be able to grab the attention of like the higher ups, being like, hey, there needs to be a change. Maybe if like there's another movement and they make it way larger than this past one. Like this one was very impactful as well. But if there isn't any more protests and more movements that like grab the attention of the people, I don't think policing will change. And I'm just saying like maybe the snowball effect, it will keep on just building up and up until like it's just blows in their face and being like, hey, this is because of us, this is our fault. But like it shouldn't be like that. They should just like, we should hopefully make a change, and whenever like we have the chance to vote and we can like vote for a change.
Absolutely. Voting is definitely power. Mickey?
Honestly, not sure. As we get different administrations in the U.S., it seems that there are different views on what policing should look like and what should be said for the actions of some officers. So, to that end, I think the future of policing within the U.S. lies within communities and holding police officers accountable in any capacity that they can.
Yeah, great. So, sorry, my son is home, so you might hear some squealing. So the CCRB, the Civilian Complaint Review Board, is an civilian oversight agency that investigates police misconduct and then recommends discipline. What do you believe civilian oversight agencies like the CCRB should be doing aside from investigating police misconduct, if anything? Yeah, we'll start with you.
Did you say me? You started with me?
Here.
So, well, I think when I wasn't able to like have a very close interaction like with like cops here, like maybe like one or two. But when I was in the program with the kids and cops and another one that's called the Teen Empowerment, we were able to have like this like discussion where with a bunch of like people that were like had the same ideas as us, and we had an ex-cop that was with us at the time who was telling us how like youth are like the problem causers of like why cops act the way they do. And after that, we like as like I think as a programs they should probably like the program should like be able to be the ones that like talk to the cops and be like, instead of like just like looking into like their misconducts or like things that they do wrong, they should probably also help out in like how we were talking earlier about the hiring process. They should also probably be a part of that.
Great. Mickey?
I think it'd be great if there was an increased social media presence for the CCRB. If communities aren't really aware of certain resources when it comes to reporting instances of police misconduct, they're probably going to be less inclined to speak up for themselves or just interact with different organizations like the CCRB.
Great. I'm going to be reaching out to you specifically with help for that. And then Mia?
Adding on to what everything else that has been said, I think they should be a part of like the hiring team of police officers. So be a part of the recruitment, be a part of the hiring revamping, being part of the like remaking the hiring questions, and then also be a part of like the whole process in general. Instead of being reactive, be proactive as a group, and even connecting with like me, I'm in Seattle. We'd love to partner with you to start doing work and making changes within our areas. So just making sure that you're connecting with even more communities than just where you're at now, because there's so much power we all have together. So just coming together and like using our voices and voting, that has already been said, and writing people who empower to make changes, I think that would be a big step up.
Awesome. This is so great. And now I want you guys to speak directly to the adults in the room. We have teachers, practitioners. What do you want them to keep in mind about police and their interactions with young people? What do you want them to know, and what do you guys want to say to them? Nikki, let me start with you.
I guess what I'd want to say to them was giving youth like more spaces to speak on their interactions with police, giving them foundations, giving them opportunities to create change within their communities. Yeah, I guess that's it. And for youth, I guess, in specific, just having the confidence and knowing that nothing you say is going to be totally wrong, and that everyone starts from somewhere. So as long as you know that you have something to say, try and say it.
Absolutely. And putting power on your lived experience, I think, is a big one for young people. Mia, how about you? What do you want to say to the adults in the room?
I would say making sure that we know police interactions should not be negative. They shouldn't invoke fear in people. To the adults, I would say, like what was already said, continuing to make spaces for youth to share their opinions, make sure that they're being heard, and not just on issues that concern the police, on issues that concern our education, our communities, and so much more, because we should be a part of the decision-making process that impacts us as youth, but also that impacts our future and our communities, because this is our life and we want to be a part of those changes and those processes. And then to the youth who are watching, I would say what was already said too, like, don't be afraid to speak up. Your feelings are valid and they should be heard and respected, and changes should be made. But if you're not seeing them being made, you have to be that change too, because that's the only way things are going to improve and get better.
Awesome. Javier?
Yeah, sorry, it's having internet issues. But yeah, like as they were saying, to build on to what they were saying, like being part of like these groups of like getting to be with adults and stuff like that. I think it's also like, hey, the adults that are the older people that are now, we're not the same as you guys. Like, hey, we're like our generations have like are probably a little bit more have more knowledge of things than you guys did when you guys were children, and like these generations have been like things are different now, and like maybe it's better to have like interaction with these like this new generation that's coming up, because these kids have different ideas than what you guys did when you guys were kids or teenagers. Like we're all just growing up faster every day more and more.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that we are dated and we need to learn from the young people. I totally agree. Thank you guys so much. This has been a wonderful, wonderful panel. I know that we have a ton of questions coming into the chat for you three. So let me hand it over to Yohara to run Q&A. She will be reading out questions from our audience, but thank you three so much for participating.
Thank you so much, Haria. Thank you so much, panelists. Again, it's just so inspirational and impressive, not only to have you here, but to hear your incredible insights on how to really, move forward in improving police relations. The first question that we have is a little bit of a longer one. Someone says, I also think that critical race theory is important to make apparent how prevalent systemic racism is in the U.S. After supposed emancipation, there was no Truth and Reconciliation Commission like in South Africa. So much of the history and reality of racism isn't taught in schools or otherwise acknowledged and addressed. For example, how redlining impacted and still does wealth accumulation in neighborhoods, which also impacts the tax base for public schools, etc. It's a ripple effect. So this is more of a statement. I know that they called out critical race theory. Mickey, do you have any response to that?
I agree with everything they said. It's true that that's what CRT focuses on and emphasizes, and that would pretty much be the objective within that, because we know that lots of communities within NYC are heavily impacted by the NYPD, and much of it is based off of redlining and sectioning off certain demographics of people in certain neighborhoods, and then filling those neighborhoods with certain negative impacts and things such as not having the best opportunity for schooling and education and just overall resources. So, yeah.
Mia, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I agree. Everything that was said was correct. And I think, like I always like to say, it goes back to education. So we could be fighting for our education to improve, to add ethnic studies, to fund counselors, not cops, to increase our mental health resources and our counselors in our schools. It starts from educating our youth so we can continue to educate the future generations. But I totally agree with that statement.
Thanks, Mia. Javier, do you have anything to add?
No, I just want to say that I agree with what everyone else was saying as well.
Awesome. The next question is, how can schools or government give more space for young people to share their voice and experience? So how can schools and the government give more space for young people to share their voice or their experience? I'm going to kick it off with Javier.
I think schools, like maybe more possibly public schools, should be able to show these programs to their kids, being like, hey, there's these programs in your communities. You guys should go join them. You guys should go like the program that I'm in. It was I was invited into here, and if more teenagers know about these programs, I think they'd be more invested into speaking out and also being able to interact with all these adults and being able to share your word. And for the government, I think it would just have to do with starting with the small programs in the communities, and then now we have social media. We can make our word be heard through the media and being like contacting even like our own majors or people that like our representatives to being like, hey, you guys listen to us? Like, hey, there's these changes that need to be made. Like, please.
Awesome. That's such a good point, Javier. Especially, it's one of the things to think about too is, what are the spaces that are created that, like you said, you don't know what you don't know. So how can the word really get out to youth to empower them to participate in these spaces and like share their thoughts and insights? Thank you for that. Mickey, how can schools and or the government give more space for young people to share their voices and experiences?
I agree with what Javier said. There are lots of like organizations out there, different like community organizations, and I think it's just a matter of schools bringing them to their students' attention. That's how I found out about the CCRB and doing work with the New York City Commission on Human Rights as well. So just making sure that you go out there and you find those resources and you just give them to their students, because that's probably what they're waiting for.
Nice. The idea of like kind of the gatekeepers and the people that can kind of allow some of this flow of information. Awesome. Mia?
I agree with everything that has already been said, but adding on to that, I think school districts and the government needs to meet students and youth where we're at. You need to come into our classrooms, but not during our lunch or during our sports or positive activities, not during our time, but during our education time when we're in math or history or anything. Come and visit us, come and communicate with us and meet us where we're at and listen to what needs to be said and listen to our issues and concerns and make changes that actually take action. So making sure they're meeting us where we're at, but also schools need to be giving youth these opportunities and these breaks to know about these community events and these community groups that we have to make the changes.
Amazing. Was that an easy transition for you, Mia, when you first heard about a program or an opportunity to be more engaged? Was it just like, oh, I really want to be a part of it? Or did your peers encourage, did you go with your friends? Like, what made you take that extra step from hearing about it to actually participating?
I've always been involved in like social justice work my whole life just because of like my family, and my mom works for the school district and a lot of my family members do. So I've always gotten the chances to step up and make sure if I see something that I want to change or get better, I take it. So it's always been a part of me. So growing up and just stepping a little bit more out of my comfort level is something I've always been able to do. And I really encourage other people to do it too, because it really does help.
That's incredible. I wish I could say that about me when I was your age. Mickey, did you have like a story of like how you went from like learning about this information and then to actually like apply, or was it just like a natural step for you?
I guess a natural step, and as far as like peers like encouraging me, I found out about like the CCRB and the Commission on Human Rights like my very first year of high school. I didn't know anyone at the school. I didn't have any friends, so like it wasn't like, and at my old school too, I didn't really connect with anyone as much, so it was more just like a personal choice. I saw something, I like putting myself out there, giving me an opportunity, like speak more and speak up and articulate myself. So yeah.
That's incredible. And what you have to say really just makes everyone stand at attention to really like try to implement some of these incredible ideas that you have. So thank you so much. Javier?
I'd have to say it was like close friends of mine, like starting to like pushing me to doing this, because I didn't have like much of a bad experience with like certain things and like around me. And like for me it was like I knew about these, and I didn't know much about these things really until like my friends like told me to come with them, and like and then I started to get invested into this and seeing like, hey, we should probably make a change because these things are very wrong. Like there's a lot of things like that aren't always like initially noticed, and then like through more investigation and research and like just working on this, like hey, we can make a change even as kids.
That's awesome. And or leaders. Next question is, how do you all feel about police officers being the sense of being security in schools? Mia?
I do not think we should have police officers in our schools, like I've already stated before, until the mission statement and the revamping and everything else on the recruitment changes. We should not be having them in our schools because they are not making students feel safe. They are not making them feel welcome. Yeah.
Just want to ask a follow-up because Mia, you know, in New York City it's slightly different. What is it like in your city overall in schools?
For sure. It depends on the school it depends on the school if they have police officers. Sometimes you do notice that schools with more BIPOC do have police officers at the school. And the relationship is always different for other schools. But one thing that we fight for a lot in Seattle is defunding the police and shifting that focus on to other resources for our community. So making sure youth and adults have mental health resources and making sure that we're taking care of the well-being of the people in our community before we're making them feel unsafe with police officers there.
Awesome. So it is, seems like similar models in a way, but not, I think, as prevalent as New York City. How about you, Javier?
Yeah, I think it's just like not. I wouldn't want to have a police officer be the security guard of the school. I think I'd just rather go to school and I would want someone patrolling the area, but I wouldn't want someone like a standing guard in schools, inside of the school or outside. Like maybe just have someone for emergencies, if something is to happen, they're nearby. But I wouldn't want some a police officer for security guard in the school actually.
Awesome. And can you share what it's like in Denver?
Yeah. So having not in my school personally, I don't have that, but I know in other schools they don't really feel that. They don't feel more safer. They feel a little bit more threatened of having an officer standing at the door, kind of just eyeing you and kind of most of the time kind of an edge, kind of weird. I don't feel that much better. I'm starting out my day with this one person just looking down on me because of how I look probably, or just for his own job, having to do that.
Thank you for sharing them. Thank you.
I'll just explain my school situation as far as police officers first, and then I'll go into it. So for me, I have either 1 to 2 police officers standing outside of my school every morning. They ask for your school ID and XYZ. And then inside we have security guards or a security team. And I would say there's 5 or so people on the team, and sometimes they'll be standing in the stairwells. As for the security guards, I have close relationships with lots of them. I see them every single day. They're really nice. As for the police officers, lots of the time the officers change every single day. I don't know why, but this happens. So I wouldn't say that it makes me feel more uncomfortable. I mean, more comfortable, probably more uncomfortable because I don't know them. First of all, seeing different faces every single day, so it's not really a steady feeling. And I don't see the need to have someone with in full police uniform on school campus. It seems very unnecessary and off-putting to students.
So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for laying out that visual on what it's like to enter your school every morning. The next question we have is, what does good police community relations look like? What are the barriers to good police community relations, and what steps can be taken to eliminate those barriers? I'm going to start with Nikki.
I guess within New York, the NYPD, they've been taking lots of steps to make tighter community relations. They do have workshops, so to speak, in certain communities after instances of violence. So I think that's something that they should continue to do. As far as increasing community relations, as I said before, just giving people the opportunity to interact with police outside of their jobs, just putting that human tone on top of those relations, so it doesn't seem as I guess stuffy, for lack of a better word.
Mia?
I agree with what was just said too, making sure that police officers are attending community events, just saying hi and having a more welcoming energy when they're around people, and making sure that they're like, again, like I've already previously said, meeting people where they're at. So coming into schools and just saying, hi, how are you? How's your day? What can I do to support you? Or making sure that they're just being so much more welcoming and caring to the community, just because they're not right now. And it's up to them. It's really not up to the community. Of course, we can be a part of the hiring team and we can be a part of fighting for other stuff, but it's up to the police officers to make that change and take that step to change how they are viewed from the community and from people as a society.
That's, I think, one of, it's kind of shifting the responsibility there and really putting it on the other side. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I think like a way to have like build better relations with like the cops and or police officers in your own communities is like having those having those community events, or like you're bridging the gaps, bridging the gap kids and cops, or like having like those closer interactions with like a small group of youth, and being able to like sit in groups and like talking with this officer, and like knowing this officer is like in your community, and like these like how Mia was saying, of like them going to your schools and like being like, hey there, how are you doing today? Or like just maybe not even having maybe not having a meeting, like a very professional meeting, maybe just having a casual talk with them, being like, hey, how are you doing? How's school? Or like just be able to like build that relationship with them, so you feel comfortable with the people that patrol your area and protect you.
Can you say a little bit more about the Cops and Kids program? I don't know.
Yeah, so it's just like having for us like very more professional kind of meeting, where like we invite youth to be able to have meetings with like reunions with these officers that like give their time also to be able to come sit with the youth and be able to have like a talk with them, being like, hey, look, how's your community like? And they talk about like how what things happen in their community, and then the cops can like tell them like, oh, this is the things that they do, and then things that happen in the people's community, what they would want to see more of them doing in their communities. Like how could they help out these communities that like have like higher criminal activities, and probably instead of like just not just like instead of just having instead of having a more threatening approach to these like criminal acts, like trying to like minimize what's happening there, and trying to help out this community, and like, hey, there's more things happening here. Why don't we just like try and have a talk with them? But before anything like that happens, like these things have been happening. These criminal acts have been happening often here. Why not let's have a talk with them so this doesn't keep on happening over and over again?
You're talking about direct in-person conversations with police officers that are policing your neighborhood?
Yeah, sorry, that's what I'm, sorry, yeah.
So that's pretty interesting. Mickey or Mia, have you seen those models in your respective cities? I'll start with Mickey.
Sorry, could you just repeat the models quickly? I'm sorry.
Yeah, what Javier was saying, and Javier, please correct me if I'm wrong, that there have been opportunities in the Cops and Kids program for police officers to meet directly with youth and community members and have open conversations about the issues that are, affecting them, ways of possibly preventing crime, etc. But having face-to-face conversations with those that are responsible for keeping the public safe. Have you seen that kind of dynamic or model, Mickey, for you in New York?
With working with the CCRB, other than that, not really. Unless someone's like a participant in one of like the STARS programs or like one of the NYPD youth programs. and even then it's not, I don't, from my understanding, you're not really talking about police reform, more so like if you have any interest in being a police officer or working with the police force.
Thank you. Mia? What's it like in Seattle?
In Seattle, there have not been any that I've been aware of. And if there have been, they are not accessible for youth to either attend because they're during the school day or they're just made so it's difficult for students to be able to attend and arrive and have those conversations. And that's something that occurs a lot with making sure youth voice is heard. We are not able to be a part of those conversations because they don't want to hear what we have to say.
Interesting. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Next question is, are you hopeful that your generation will be able to make real change in police reform? I'll start off with Mickey.
I think to some extent, because although I would say that our generation is very in tune to these certain instances or certain instances, is as much as lots of people within our generation fake their allyship to some extent and not only do it for what it would look like or what their perception or what other people's perception of them will be when participating in certain conversations like this. So as much as we do participate, and I would like to say that we're one of the more in tuned generations, as you just said, is as much as lots of people are faking it. So maybe not.
Javier, are you hopeful that your generation will be able to make real change in police reform?
Yeah, I think hope is the right word because like you can't really say, oh hell yeah, like these teenagers are gonna make a change. No, it's really just more like hope because like my own school, like people that I know and like how I see them, they're like very kind of don't do things like thinking. And like the few people that do think about like what they're doing and like wanting to make a reform or anything, and wanting to help out and like making a reform in injustice, they actually think through things. Some people just kind of like how like people that were rioting and stealing things. That's kind of how like a minority of the people are in like, our generation. And like there's a good majority of people that want to make a change, and there's that minority of people that just like that want to just like kind of destroy everything and like do it for no reason, just because like, hey, everyone's doing it, so can we, and we can just get away with it because like it's happening for the purpose, or like it's happening to make a change, and that's not really what they do it with that backup, even though it really ruins our cause of like wanting to make a change.
Thank you. And Mia?
I would say we already are. I think just by us attending this event and many other youth being a part of different conversations and like being able to just talk about it has shown that we are going to be a part of the change. It was already said before, of course, there are performative activists in our generation and in generations before and after us there will be. But we are continuing to make that shift. We're part of, I think we're the stepping stones of that shift of understanding that it's not just the police, it's so much more than that, and the picture is so much bigger than what we're seeing. It's the racism in schools, in our communities, and so many more places that I think we are the first step to shifting our focus to the bigger picture and not just the little issues and seeing what we can do first.
If you say that in Seattle, I'm like, dope. It's an amazing insight. Well, thank you all so much for being here and not only positing ideas for how to really rethink and reimagine policing, but also like living those solutions yourself. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you all continue the work that you're doing and then create a network nationally really to continue building on these ideas and how we can all work together to get to actually articulate the image that you all are hoping for and working towards. So thank you all so much. Next, we're going to be hearing from you all. So those of you that are in attendance, we're going to open up the floor to have folks share what they think can be actionable next steps in really improving policing. So I'm going to pass it on to Darius, who will lead us in this section. If we can upgrade Darius. Great. Take it away.
All right, so can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, so my name is Darius. I'm 14 years old from the Bronx. I joined the CCRB because I wanted to give a voice to young people's experiences in the policing system, and to then use that to not only refine and improve the policing system, but the criminal justice system as a whole. So now I'd like everyone is now invited to speak and participate. You can write in chat and connect to one of our chat monitors to be called on to speak. And we're excited to kick things off with Yami Bravo, who has agreed to speak first.
Thank you, Darius. And let's see if Yami was able to join in. Might have been some connection.
It's me, Yami.
It's me, Yami. I'm here.
Oh, perfect. Take it.
Esa pregunta.
What was the question gonna be?
So Yami, imagine you're a policymaker in your city. What are 3 actionable steps you would suggest to change policing towards youth that could go into effect tomorrow? And for all of those in attendance, feel free to use the Q&A function again to share your thoughts. Yami?
So I think 3 action steps that I would suggest to change policing towards youth would probably be I think my own personal experience when I had talked with an ex-cop, he tried putting the blame on youth a lot as if it was our fault that cops acted in a certain way. So maybe don't pressure teenagers so much, and especially with a lot of teenagers now, they have anxiety. So if you go talking to a teenager and make it seem like they did something wrong, obviously they're going to panic and start acting defensive. And
Any other actionable steps you would take?
just overall being calm and collect with the person towards with each other, obviously. The teenager can't be so defensive at first if the cop isn't doing anything. Obviously they're gonna be scared, but just be easygoing with the situation. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to see what some responses are here. We have Jonika Roy. Soren, can you unmute Jonika Roy?
Hello, you can hear me?
Hi, Shanika. Thank you. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay.
You can provide the correct pronunciation of your name and what grade you're in and what city you're from.
Okay, so my name is Chayonika. I'm from New York City, specifically the borough of Queens, and I'm in 12th grade. So I think what I would like, I think, I go to a majority BIPOC school, and so even if I was not directly affected by the police, I still know stories, I know people, and, I think that's sort of a community response in terms of, who you live with and who you're with community with. But things I would like to see, I think, is the budget for the NYPD to go down, or, to sort of be reconciled and be put towards other things. Because I think it's an issue throughout the country, not just in New York, but also having an inflated military budget, having an inflated police budget, it affects us internationally and then locally about how we treat people, because it's sort of funding, it's like profiting war in a way, right? In that regard, I think what I would see is reduce the budget. And then two, I would like to see, you know, obviously education, and also three, sort of like confrontation and the education on how to do confrontation correctly, because people could know how to use a gun, but they don't know how to communicate effectively their ideas. So yeah, those are my ideas.
Those are fantastic. Amazing. Thank you so much. YAC members, any response to these really actionable, concrete next steps that we can take? You can either unmute yourself or any response, Mary or Logan. All right. Cool. While you're thinking about that, some other recommendations that we have we have someone saying, thank you for everything that has been shared. I'm based in South Central Los Angeles, and we're working on reimagining youth justice, probation, and police in schools. I'm wondering, what are some thoughts on removing police from schools? Gloria, Soren, can you unmute Gloria? I want to hear a little bit more about what her experience is in LA.
Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for wanting to hear more and really appreciating all of the young people that have shared their experiences and all of their thoughts. So in my question, I was trying to summarize and synthesize, right, the give you all some context around the work that we're doing, which is around moving young people out of the probation department and into a new youth development department. And so that work is called Youth Justice Reimagined. And so my question, and we're also working on removing police and the entities out of schools, and instead building schools that are not relying on law enforcement. So having peace builders, intervention workers, and a peace builder, or at least how we're referencing peace builders, is someone that is either system impacted, formerly incarcerated, or really knows the community, and is not law enforcement, that can support young people with, right, like going to school when there's conflict, right, de-escalation, and again, like being an alternative from law enforcement. So I was wondering, like, what were some of you, like, what do you all think when we think about, if you all, like, can envision removing law enforcement from schools, do you all see that possible? And, like, you know, if so, like, what are some things that you all would like to see? And maybe if you all don't think that that's possible, right, like, you know, maybe what are some alternatives to law enforcement that you all might think of?
Gloria, that is incredible. I've never even, that's such a radical and restorative model to think about. That's amazing. Logan, do you have a response on what it could look like without having police in these spaces?
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead, Logan.
I think it could either go two ways. Police sometimes make people feel calmer. Well, they control themselves a lot more. They don't act out as much. Or without police, also, people can feel more safe to be themselves and have fun with their friends and stuff.
Awesome. Mary or Darius, do you have anything to add?
No.
Cool. Thank you so much, Gloria. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, especially from LA. That's fantastic. There's a comment here that police officers get loads of training in dealing with high-pressure situations. How is it rational to blame teenagers, most of whom have no similar training, for being the targets of aggressive and often disproportionate policing? Awesome. And Rosalind, maybe you can share some actionable next steps on how to steer away from that. We also have a comment, another question for the YAC actually. There seems to be a debate over whether police should become more involved in local communities or not. I have seen many responses that indicate it makes youth uncomfortable, as if police are collecting information on them. What are your thoughts on that? Logan, do you feel, how do you feel about that? Do you feel that uncomfortable should be, let me just repeat that. There seems to be a debate over whether police should have more involvement in local communities or not, and they've seen many responses that indicate it makes youth feel uncomfortable to have that type of presence, as if police are collecting information on them. How do you all feel about that? Logan?
I don't think it would be uncomfortable to have police in local community. Unfortunately, I do think the skin color of the police in what community they are does matter, though, because in a black and brown community, if there was a white police officer, they may not be as open to them. They may tend to not try to build a relationship with them. But if it was a black or brown police officer, they would try to build a relationship with them. And also, if the police were doing something involving with the kids, like say they were at a basketball court and they try to play basketball with them, even if they sucked at it, like the kids would still appreciate them for trying to make an effort.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Can we unmute Rosalind? They had a response to one of the actionable next steps.
Let's see. Hi, can you all hear me?
Hi, Rosalind.
Hi, sorry, I'm a little tech challenged, but this has been an amazing experience. Just listening to these brilliant young people, it just makes me really, and I'm generally pretty optimistic, although sometimes I have my moments. And I've just learned so much from you all and just have so much additional restored faith. So props to you all. But just some of the examples, I love what I heard about the some of the restorative examples and the inclusiveness, the person who called in from LA, just, those very real examples of replacing police officers with people from the community, which we've heard people say in different ways, right? Whether it's being on, participating in the hiring process of police officers, whether we do that. I definitely think youths from the community have to be part of that process, but also people who've been very active in the community, who've been probably part of Cop Watch, not just people that are handpicked that are going to necessarily, not make things too difficult or challenge the authority. I think, the inclusiveness has to be real, right? And really, looking at doing things differently. It's very clear, it's obvious that having people like therapists, having counselors, providing our youth with resources to deal with a lot of the stress and the trauma that they've endured and that they're currently experiencing, how to, different ways of dealing with conflict, just there's so much opportunity when we look at this phenomenon called education, where we can really we can do things differently. It should not just be kind of like this top down and very sterile environment. So having counselors, having, youth led and peer opportunities to just, to discuss trauma, to, be more involved working with like peace. I know about violence interrupters, but also, people. So it's the old heads, I call them the OGs, who are in the community who've been directly impacted, but also working with the youth from communities, right? I am not a youth. I like to think that I'm young, but I'm actually a senior attorney. I work with the Community Justice Unit. I just started in CJU at the Legal Aid Society in Queens, New York. I just literally last week finished up with the decarceration unit, where my goal was to get as many people off of Rikers Island as possible. So, but thank you for allowing me this opportunity to share and to participate. This has really been a wonderful evening and experience.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rosalind. Thank you so much for joining us and for the work that you're doing in the community. Thanks a lot. So I'm going to have Logan, we're going to go to the next question for participants. So feel free to respond in the Q&A. We're really excited to hear what your thoughts on this are. Logan?
Okay, what do you see as the biggest hurdle/obstacle to change?
Awesome. And feel free to respond in the chat. Let's see. And while we're waiting, Logan, what do you see as the biggest hurdle or obstacle to change?
Right now, I think that youth has such a negative outlook on police. They tend to stay away from them, and that's just their mindset because of what they've seen on TV and all the things that happen with the BLM movement. So I think it's just a matter. It's going to take time to get youth to trust police again and feel open to build a relationship with them.
That's totally fair. Darius, do you have any thoughts?
Oh yeah, I think it was Rosalind Morrison. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. They made a comment about how earlier on about how police officers, they get a lot of training with dealing in high pressure situations. Yet it's not. How is it rational to blame teenagers who have no similar training to being targets of aggression? I really agree with that point, and I'd just like to add on because I've done debate before. I've been doing it for 2 years, and in a lot of the cases that I've written, we deal with police officers. And there's something, I've done a lot of things over the past 2 years, and that is that police officers, especially those who are appointed to act as like security for schools, they are not trained to handle children at all. Like only about 12 states mandate training for these officers that are going to head on with kids. So you see so many situations and incidents that involve police officers having misconduct with people of color, kids with disabilities, and this is because they aren't trained the same way that people, like for example, if you have a teacher that specializes with special education students, I'd rather have them being the one to deal with those kids with special needs than a police officer who's just going to result with brute force. And another thing of that is that we should really make it so that people who have had repeated or even one offense of misconduct against children should not be allowed to continue working with other children. If you don't know how to safely work with children, then you shouldn't be the ones protecting them.
This might be unprofessional, but my response is louder for those in the back. Thank you, Darius. Amazing. Logan, let's go to the next slide. Logan, sorry.
What can we do to overcome some of these obstacles?
Awesome. So in these ideas of imagining, reimagining policing and public safety, what are folks' thoughts on how we overcome some of these obstacles? Feel free to dump it in the chat. And while we're waiting on that, Logan, what is your first take on that?
I think they should actually in the chat, in the Q&A,
Yeah, what was
can you hear me?
now we can, yeah.
If those police officers who have more skills or lived experience, maybe they can have different uniform to let the public know that these police officers say who have empathy, who are trained. And I agree with that. I think we have to have like some way of knowing that the police officers are trained with dealing with kids and they have experience and they understand like how to build a relationship with us.
Awesome. That was great. And I know parts of it were a little cut out. Just want to, Logan, can you repeat their response one more time?
She said, this sounds crazy, but what if those police officers who are more skilled or lived experience, maybe they can have a different uniform to let the public know that these police officers say who have empathy, who are trained, than the uniform side.
Awesome. Darius, what do you think about that idea?
The one you just talked about, the uniform.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think it's an interesting idea. I think, but I guess conversely, like just to wipe out like some of the possible issues I could see with that is that it'd be hard to kind of tell those police officers who are skilled or live experience. Like I can totally see it being put into the system. I remember earlier on there were points being made about how like if officers of color could change the system from the inside, maybe award people, officers of color and other such officers who are actively working to reform the system from the inside, some sort of identification, a badge, a bracelet, a uniform change. I definitely think that's an interesting idea.
Awesome. Great. And Logan, with the last slide.
Okay, so the same question, what can we do to overcome some of these obstacles?
No, actually, that was my bad. I think that is the last question. Awesome. One more thing. It looks like Gloria had one more thing to add. That Senate Bill 2 was signed in California earlier last week, and the state bill decertifies law enforcement with misconduct. That's huge. That there have been some bills that have proposed that here, but that's big news from California that they just passed that very recently. Thank you so much for sharing that, Gloria. All right. Thank you all so much. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say if I could just add on one more thing.
Absolutely.
So I know that we've talked a lot about reforms to the policing system and stuff like that. I just wanted to, just really quickly and shortly delve into like some of the more specific reforms that I've seen that have been effective. Like, for example, in Chicago, they made plans for progressive reforms to school resource officers. They for a program based on feedback, and they saw that the arrest rates of students on school property decreased exponentially. We saw African American student arrest rates decreased by 70%. Latinx arrest rates decreased by 86%, and arrest rates for white people decreased by 85%. And it came with a lot of new regulations and training methods to ensure that the officers that are going to be on school property are ones who are actually competent enough to deal with those children without like arresting them using brute force and stuff of the like. I think it's stuff like this which is really going to bring about change.
My reaction to that is that emoji with the head exploding. Those are really, really fantastic ideas. Thank you so much, Darius. And we're making it a point to really document this. This event is recorded, and we're going to be sharing some of these insights and ideas that youth from all around the country have shared, and we really, really appreciate it. And before we close out and I share some information about the YAC, and we have a closeout from Haria, anything else that the YAC members want to share, anything before we wrap up? Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. So for those of you that live in New York City, we are excited to announce that in the coming weeks, we will be opening up our CCRB Youth Advisory Council for the 2022 cohort. So if you're interested in youth advocacy, advocating us, the agency, to better our youth relations, to really empower youth to posit ideas on how to, again, improve this dynamic, please let us know. You can reach out to us at outreach@ccrb.nyc.gov, and then just send us an email saying that you're interested in the application. And once the application goes live in the upcoming weeks, you'll be the first to know that it'll be that you can apply for that position. So it'll be open to New York City youth 18 and under. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Haria, and thank you all so much for really being the thought leaders that we really crave. Haria?
Yes, thank you all so much, and thank you to everyone who participated today. We had some phenomenal conversations with young people tackling very heavy topics like defunding the police, reallocating resources to guidance counselors, and understanding that there are no limits to how we can challenge the status quo. You all discussed how policing in schools affect your mental health. You discussed feeling over-policed and wanting police-free schools. I was inspired by the young people who talked about their passion and interest in this topic and stepping up to work on this issue and recognizing the need for reform, even if they hadn't faced police misconduct themselves. We have a lot to think about, like including civilian oversight and hiring, requiring officers to learn critical race theory during training, accepting and elevating restorative justice models, and fixing our education systems to ensure that everyone, including those who might become police officers one day, learn to appreciate the humanity of others. We as adults need to make sure that the young people have a voice in their education, their communities, and the way that they're policed. And I want to highlight how great it was to have young people from all over the country. I know that being virtual isn't ideal, but it does help us connect and learn from people from Chicago, LA, Seattle, and share our knowledge from New York. I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today, and our YAC members, Sarah, Darius, Mary, Logan, Paige, Kyrie, Felix, Jaylene, Elijah, Donnie, Kyra, and Saeed, who have been working hard and behind the scenes to put this event together. To the adults and gatekeepers in the room, let us make a pact to invite youth to every conversation we have and make sure that we are always creating space for them to share their ideas. To the young people in the room, make a pact amongst yourselves, led by the 6 young panelists who spoke today, to speak up and speak out every chance that you get and believe in the power of your lived experience. Thank you all for participating today, and look out for an email from us with a recap of today's event, and I hope everyone has a great night. Thank you again.